Hi, Blastpop here. Today I'm taking a look at the GMT expansion for Panzer, a game designed by James M. Day, and the module is mostly designed by Fernando Solo Ramos. This is an expansion for small unit actions in France 1940 and includes French and additional German forces that you don't already have in the base game. This comes in a GMT 1.5 to 2 inch size box. The back of the box contains details with respect to the unit cards that come in the game, and it tells you that you need ownership of expansions 1, 2, and 3 are not required for the use of this expansion, which is expansion number 4. Expansions 1 and 2 add additional forces to the original Panzer game on the Eastern Front. Number 3, I believe, adds the forces on the Western Front for the Americans mostly 1944 in around the Normandy area. And additionally, some samples of unit pieces, a little bit of the game, one of the game boards, and has a high solitaire suitability because it adds a solitaire module to the game and has a medium-high complexity. That might be open to some debate, but regardless, it is a very playable and fun game system. Included in your package is a playbook, kind of a thin gloss paper, and that weighs in at 68 pages, and including cover. And you have an extensive table of contents, your credits. You have your historical notes, optional rules, which could be important things like tank fright, which was something that was a problem in 1940 for the Allies. Specific rules for various forces, rules for leadership, which is something that was introduced after the original game came out. Solitaire rules. I haven't had the opportunity to use the solitaire rules yet, although off-board artillery I don't think is particularly included, if I'm not mistaken, in at least the way the rules are originally written for the use of off-board artillery. And it's quite an extensive section of rules, all for solitaire usage. My suggestion is play some of the scenarios in the base game first at a minimum without solitaire rules to become familiarized with how the game plays. Add some of the advanced rules along the way, and then finally my bet would be to use the solitaire rules, because you may have rules overload in attempting to do so, because there is a fair section of special rules for the solitaire game, and that might muddle things up if you try to incorporate and play out of the box all at once. Continuing solitaire rules. And finally, to the scenarios. Scenario 35, Part 1 of Crehan in Belgium. Part 2. Now, it's as typical with the scenarios, either give you a situation, what maps to use, illustration of how the maps are set up, your setup, and the actual composition of your forces, point values, the type of troops, whether they're seasoned, and so on. And continuing on, Rommel crosses the Meuse. And they have a typical mix of smaller and large scenarios throughout the game system. And I haven't played any of this yet, as you will see, because the counters are unpunched. The occasional picture. Capture of Stone, France. And there is a specific non-generic map for the use of stone. Fairly large scenario. A classic battle. Counterattack of stone. De Gaulle's first action. I'm glad that they did a expansion for the French in 1940, because it truly is a different style of gameplay compared to the Eastern Front in World War II. Especially when you add tank fight into the mix. Forces of lesser armor, units that are less strong. So you're getting a boatload of scenarios, as you can see right here. Unit summaries for the units that come in the game. Again, you need some of the basic forces and markers and stuff from the first full game in order to use this. Some solitaire tables. Your TO&E booklet, which comes in every module, which tells you how to compose forces for your game with certain units, as well as just interesting historical information to peruse. All interesting and useful information from a wargamer standpoint. Okay, you have 4 expansion counter sheets that come with the module. These are, I believe, 1-inch square size counters. They're huge. They overload the size of the hexes themselves, but in actual practice, while it may look like it's a mistake, it works just fine. We'll clip these counters anyway, so the dog ears will be removed, and consequently less opportunity for units to flip over, spill, and otherwise create a mess. French forces with French leadership. Backside of the units, and they can be different units as well on the backside. Different types to increase the amount of unit variety and options, not only for the scenarios but for the intrepid scenario designer. Thick brown core counters. Very nicely done, registered properly. Germans. Feel free to pause if you want to look at some of the counters a little bit longer. That's counter sheet 204. Leadership for British, Russians. So if you do have the original game, which you need to play this, you can add this to your forces, so you've got Russian leadership, which is nice. More French and German units. Counter sheet 4, smaller infantry counters. While there are unit nationality markings, I suspect that in gameplay there's a possibility in less than ideal lighting conditions that you may end up having a situation where they might be somewhat hard to discern the difference. Counters want to pop right out. Good sign. Okay, you have the unit cards for the various individual type units, tanks and infantry and so on. They're counter sheet type material with a nice finish on it. So if you spill, heaven forbid you spill a little bit of your soda or beer on the game, if you quickly clean it up, your damage is likely to be minimal if it lands on the cards. On counters and maps, that might be another story. So I'll just give a quick look here of the various units. Also included is a bag, some baggies. See if I can focus in on this a little bit better for you. And I'll just move right through them, and you can pause if you'd like. So these cards are not just tanks, but guns, various types of artillery, tanks as well, infantry. I won't bother to explain the use of these cards because presumably you may have knowledge of how these cards are used. And while at first the use of cards might appear to be somewhat cumbersome, in practice they're not, because typically, in most scenarios at the very least, you have some units but not a sampling of everything, so consequently, especially the smaller scenarios, you have a handful of cards in use. Limbers. That's not something you see every day in a World War II or modern war game. Probably limbers for your anti-tank guns if you're not manhandling them. What's also nice is the way the cards are set up with a unit on each card on each side. There's a possibility that you may have card units you need on both sides of a given card. So that helps reduce the clutter in play. Again, you're seeing all like smaller equipment, smaller tanks, older varieties, stuff you haven't seen too much before in the series. I suspect once they come out with a North Africa expansion, you'll see something similar as well for small tanks, tankettes, especially with the Italian forces. All really cool. So there's quite a few different forces in the game. And then we get to the maps. Typical for these games. Big hexes. usually representative terrain. As you can see, here's the town of Stone, which is used for historical scenarios. So this is based on the actual terrain of the area. Boards are reminiscent to a degree of the old Panzer Blitz Squad Leader series maps. As I've noted before in the modern series of games, sometimes the terrain feels like it's squashed on the board to make it fit, and doesn't seem to flow quite so naturally, except that this map and the previous map with Stone kind of are made to work, to be an integrated whole. And of course, the maps of generic are meant to create situations for various scenarios and scenario designs and designers. Nice cardstock. Holds up well, lays flat, especially if you bend back the machine folds. So here's what you get in the Panzer Expansion, France 1940. An awful lot of gaming in one package. This has been Blastpop. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Bye.